I think it's a little boring. I think it's a little whitewashed. When I do see people who look like me, I get very excited. The other night at Target, for some reason, there were about 6 black ladies shopping, and it was amazing. I'm like, wow, there's so many black people in here right now. And it's something you notice, because you don't get it all the time. The black people that are here are amazing. They're awesome, and they make great music, and they're brilliant artists, and they're some really smart, talented people. And because there aren't that many of us, we get to come together and get to know each other and kind of create that environment for ourselves.
Side note, this is just a little insert. Me and Amira have not seen any black people since we've been here. And we saw one running, but that, you know, where are you guys? Where are you? Y'all, there are no black people in Austin. There's none.
Wait, there's one.
There's one? He works at the Target. We need to ask. Oh, I see another. Okay, wait, maybe we're getting closer to black people, because we were just at Juiceland, and it's like everyone in there had never seen a black person before. And it was like, right.
Like, treat us just like a human. Just like you are. We are all humans with souls that need to be treated with respect. And race has it doesn't matter. But they don't see it that way, some of them. And it's ignorance, and I have come to understand that it's not personal most of the time. But it's hard to not take it personal.
Right. My camera.
There is racism at UT, there's segregation at UT, there's microaggressions that exist.
The Civil War, Austin was seen as sort of a refuge for freed slaves, safe from most of the racial violence that plagued the South. By 1880, the city's African American population lived in pockets spread throughout the city. It was as geographically integrated as Austin has ever been. In 1928, a new city plan was put in place. The Supreme Court had ruled that explicit zoning laws pushing segregation were unconstitutional. So the city leaders got a little creative. If you were an African American and wanted access to public services like schools and parks, you had to live in a so-called Negro district, newly formed on the east side of town. By 1940, you can see how the once dispersed African American population had become concentrated in one area. A few years later, the segregation was cemented. The federal government, in an effort to build wealth following the Depression, began backing mortgage loans. But they wouldn't back these mortgage loans in certain high-risk neighborhoods that were redlined. Minority neighborhoods were virtually always redlined. The effect was that African Americans were left on the outside of what would become one of the largest wealth drivers in U.S. history. Fast forward to now. Austin's population has boomed since the 1970s. The region's development has swept away many of the historically black schools, neighborhoods, and business centers that served as cultural anchors for the community. Rising property values and taxes have forced many African American families to seek more affordable housing in the suburbs. Left with a smaller percentage of black residents in the city, the ties between Austin's African American minority and its Anglo majority have weakened. There are efforts by some in the African American community to rebuild these business and cultural institutions. But reforging the connections requires work from both sides of the racial divide. Without a proactive and concerted effort.
What it do? This is your brother Bishop of Bishop's Zone TV, and today's topic is Austin overrated for black people? Yes, is Austin, Texas. You know, America's most talked about city in the nation right now. It is one of the fastest growing cities in America right now. It is attracting so many tech companies and a plethora of people from all over the nation, not just the nation, but in the world, coming to Austin, Texas. And I'm gonna get into the reasons why I think Austin is a very overrated city, specifically if you're black. Now, this is not for the average black person. I mean, look, we're not monolithic people. And I know a plethora of people who have moved to Austin or live in Austin, and hey, they love it. They don't plan on leaving anytime soon. However, on the flip side, I know a lot of people that have actually moved to Austin or grew up in Austin and find themselves moving elsewhere. And I'm gonna touch on some of those topics as to why people might not see Austin the way as certain demographics see Austin, aka, just gonna put it out there, white people. Yes, white people. Right now, Austin is white people's paradise. It is the white version of Atlanta, if you may. So, disclaimer. For the record, I am a born and raised Texan. I was born in East Texas, and probably to some of y'all, East Texas would be considered the Mississippi or Alabama of Texas. Yes, it is worlds apart from Austin, especially if you are not familiar with Texas and you're just kind of familiar with Austin and other major cities in Texas like Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, what have you. But yes, I am originally from East Texas, Longview to be exact. Look it up. It's on the map in between Dallas and Shreveport. And I can say I've been familiar with Austin going on, man, probably since 2005, 2006, when I was going to school in Waco, Texas. Shout out to the code. Yeah, I've been going to Austin since then, like back and forth. You know, if you're familiar with Waco is like an hour and 30 minutes to Austin. It's kind of in that sweet spot of Austin and Dallas. And so I used to always make my ventures to Austin, hit I-35 South, and man, I used to hit up so many different, at that time, streetwear. I used to be real big on hypebeast gear, and I used to hit up streetwear stores back then, and that was kind of, you know, the thing to do in Austin, you know, and then peruse down 6th Street. So I've seen Austin, like I said, on a consistent basis from about 2004, 5-ish, up into 2022. So I remember when it was, you know, considered a underrated college town, mostly centered around UT, now to a tech hub and just a magnet for, like I said, tech bros and just hipsters and any and everybody else, you know, back when the slogan was "Keep Austin Weird" and whatnot. And I just want to say, for the past 5 or 10 years, Austin has been getting a lot of publicity from everybody, from Newsweek to Forbes magazine and any and everywhere. And then you have a whole plethora of celebrities moving here to Austin, and companies, Fortune 500 companies. You know, you have Tesla moving their headquarters here, and so it's just a real hotbed right now, and a lot of people are interested in moving to Austin. More specifically, you even have a lot of black people very interested in moving to Austin because word travels fast. So I'm here to give you my perspective of Austin from a black perspective, because I do think that plays a part in choosing if you want to actually move to Austin. Yeah, it definitely does play a part. Now, also, another disclaimer, no disrespect to the born and raised black Austinites. Shout out to y'all. Y'all some real ones. This is no disrespect. Also, I got family in Austin as well, in the suburbs. Shout out to, you know, Round Rock. So, hey, I'm not disrespecting, I'm not throwing shade at Austin, because I know some of y'all people, I know some of y'all Austinites or some of y'all transplants to Austin think that, you know, Houston and Dallas, for some reason, got something against Austin. I see it, I hear y'all full of vegan shit. So let's get into it. Now, one thing that's very, very obvious when you visit Austin in comparison to Dallas or Houston is that Austin lacks a lot of black folks. A lot of black folks. I'm telling you right now. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't a black community or a very strong black community in Austin. Quite the contrary. If you actually do your research on Austin, at one point in time, Austin was somewhat of a refuge for a lot of black people in various freedmen towns centered around Austin. So if you're not familiar with freedmen towns, Texas, if I'm not mistaken, had the most freedmen towns in the United States. And at one point in time, when Austin was growing and becoming the capital of the state of Texas, a lot of black people from those small freedmen towns started migrating to Austin. So Austin, believe it or not, has a lot of rich black history in the city. You wouldn't know that now, but it's there. So Austin has a very rich black history. And unfortunately, due to gentrification, that is becoming less and less apparent. And the city, I feel as though they don't do a very good job of preserving their history. I mean, there, I guess, is some programs and things of that nature that they're trying to do so now, but it's, to me, it's kind of too little too late. But, you know, if you're a black Austinite, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be stepping out of my element on that, because I'm not a born and raised Austinite, you know, I just visited. So one thing is for certain, that Austin lacks a lot of black culture. Even though its roots is entrenched in black culture, they lack a lot of black culture today. Another thing that you'll notice, and this is common in America, but it's very common in Austin, is the segregation. Austin seems to be pretty, like I said, pretty segregated. Black people tend to reside in the East Austin, and that's a small section compared to the rest of the city in Austin. Now, if you do your research again, if you look at I-35, that was by design. You know, unfortunately, when we talk about systemic racism, we should also put an emphasis on structural racism, because they constructed freeways all throughout America that weakened black communities and separated those communities from areas of commerce. So black people couldn't benefit from other areas that whites and even in some cases Hispanics, they benefited from those areas of commerce and whatnot. And so you see that to this day. Oftentimes, I think in Austin, it's crazy, man. And I'm gonna keep it real. The most black people I've seen in Austin at one point in time, like I told you, I've been going to Austin on and off since like 2004, is during South by Southwest, or, and I hate to say this, but when I see the homeless population. That's the most times I see a concentration of black people in the actual city of Austin. Is if it's South by Southwest or if it's homeless people. I don't know what it is. I mean, I know what it is, I just told you, but that's some real shit. Like next time you go to Austin, you know, check out how many black people you'll see in the actual city, the core of Austin. I guarantee you the most black people you'll see concentrated in an area in Austin is probably homeless people. I'm not exaggerating. I wish I was, but I'm not exaggerating. Let's see. Soul food. Black cuisine. If you want the best black cuisine in Austin, if you want to support black business in Austin, then the best thing to do is go to areas like Pflugerville. Now, Pflugerville is a suburb in Austin, and that is probably where you find the most black people in Austin, outside of the more historical black neighborhoods in East Austin. Yeah, Pflugerville is probably where you find the most black people in the area in Austin, and they have some pretty good businesses there. I can't think of any right now, but man, just if you go to Austin, please make an effort to support black businesses in Austin. You know, and I'll say this about some of the white, you know, transplants in Austin, because I've met some cool white transplants in Austin. They're really good at, you know, giving you ideas on what to try, you know, on businesses to support. I say they're really good at that. So, you know, do yourself a favor. Don't just go to see, you know, the 6th Street, and which I think is kind of really played out now. You know, Congress, downtown Austin, Rainy Street. Support the local businesses in the city, man. Now, this is something else that I hear from a lot of people who moved to Austin that despise Texas, because in their mind, Austin is everything that Texas isn't, right? And a lot of people like to compare Austin to California. Well, I'm here to tell you that Austin is not necessarily California. Yes, I know it has a lot of California transplants, no different than Dallas and Houston. Now, the type of California transplants that move to these cities might differ. You might have more liberal-minded California transplants moving to Austin, whereas in Dallas you might have more conservative type of California people moving to Dallas, more specifically the northern suburbs of Dallas. In Houston, you might have more blue-collar worker California people, of more minority California transplants moving to Houston. But there is a clear distinction between the type of people from California that moved to Austin in comparison to the other big major cities in Texas. And I'm here to tell you this. Despite the fact that they do try to market themselves as a Southern California city, not like Southern Cali, but like a South California-ish city, is not, based off my experiences, and one of the things that I think is severely lacking in Austin in comparison to a LA or San Francisco or Bay Area, so to speak, is, well, okay, it's a certain soul that the Bay Area and LA has that, to me, Austin lacks. Again, I'm not shitting on Austin. Don't think I'm shitting on Austin. I like Austin. I like y'all. Man, come on now. Don't take this as a disrespect. I rocks with y'all. But there's a certain soul that Austin lacks. And I think, to me, that soul is the black soul. The black citizens of those cities that made those cities popular. Now, what I mean by that is this. In LA, I'm not saying LA's culture, black culture, is the end all be all. But you do have and not just black people, let me say this, you have a pretty rich Hispanic culture in LA. You also have a rich Asian culture in LA. You have a rich black culture in LA that we all know worldwide. That doesn't exist in Austin. See, Austin has a bit of this new flavor to it. You understand what I'm saying? In some ways, it reminds me of I guess you could say like a Portland. It's its own thing, but it's more like a Portland. It may be a Nashville than it is an LA or San Francisco or the Bay Area. Even though we try to pigeonhole Austin as a California-ish city, mostly because of outdoorsy type things. But if you've been to LA and then you go to Austin, or you go to San Francisco and you go to Austin, it's not the same. Yes, very liberal cities, but differences. And what I mean by that, like, look, when you know black culture in LA, you know about it based via, you know, South Central, Compton, Watts. And I'm not necessarily talking about just gangbang culture. I'm not talking about that. It's a rich black history that catapulted LA into mainstream society beyond just Crips and Bloods and whatnot. You know, same with the Mexican culture in LA. You know, the Asian contributions in LA that makes it a true melting pot. San Francisco, same way. You know about the Asian contributions in San Francisco, right? You know about the yuppies in the Bay Area, you know, Silicon Valley. You know about the brain epicenter the innovative epic center in Silicon Valley that makes up the Bay. You know about Oakland, the attitude, the grit, the soulfulness, the activism in the Bay Area. All those things are a combination of the city's local culture that Austin simply lacks. Even though a good amount of Austinites like to pretend that they have that on lock, I just don't see it. And that's not to say that Austin doesn't have their own culture. They do, but it's just not that. So, I think when you're talking to somebody like who's black, and let's say they visited LA and they visited the Bay Area, where a lot of these cities are losing black population, it's still something about those cities when you go there that resonates with the average black tourist. Just based off of the contributions that they've made, the legacies that they've created. You know, Austin doesn't have that. Another thing is a lot of the popular areas in Austin, a lot of the social settings, a lot of times if you're black, you're a token black. And even the fact that Austin has a lot of Hispanic people, they have more Hispanic people than they do have black people. Even Hispanic people seem somewhat kind of invisible in the very popular social settings in the city center of Austin. I always found that strange when I would go to Austin. It seemed like it has gotten worse as time went on, because like I said, I've been to Austin from 2009 and to 2022. And it seems like it gets to me a little whiter. Again, I'm not so anti-white, but my point in making this video is that a lot of media outlets and Austinites themselves try to trump Austin as being somewhat of this paradise in this red state, and in some ways that is true. You know, I often say that Austin, I like the way Austin kind of builds itself, how you know, the structural fabric of Austin. I actually find that kind of refreshing, because it's not as sprawling as Houston and Dallas. And like I said, some of the political beliefs are not as annoying as certain areas that you would find in Houston and Dallas. But what I ultimately come to grips with as far as a black person is you're very limited in Austin, and you're reminded of your skin in Austin. See, I can speak specifically for Houston. In Houston, it's easy to find your tribe because there's so many different groups of ethnic groups in Houston, in the core of Houston, but you could be pretty much comfortable wherever you at. Now, with some black folks, hey, they don't care about that. They don't mind. They don't mind if they're the only black person in the room. Fine, cool, that's on you. But you ain't about to be coming up to me talking about no damn can I touch your hair. See, I think more white people in Houston and in Dallas understand that that's grounds for getting your ass whooped talking about touching some hair. You know what I'm saying? But that might be a little bit more common in Austin when somebody get those drinks. And I'm saying that to say, again, Austin likes to boast itself as being a liberal paradise. As close as a paradise you can get in the state that's red. But I've heard the N-word twice in Austin in comparison to Houston. In times I've been to Dallas, I don't know if I've had any racial interactions in either Houston and Dallas, not like I have in Austin. Right? I've had those happen. Now subtle incidents, you always get subtle incidents. And what I mean, let me give you a perfect example of two things. First of all, ain't nobody gonna be coming up to me talking about some N-word or nothing like that, and I get they skull knocked the fuck out, you know. It's just not gonna happen. I'm not passive. I'm not just turning the other cheek. Cheeks will get turned the other away in your favor, in my favor. Not in your favor, but anyhow, anyway. Catch the point. And if you've been in Austin, you know I'm not lying. South by Southwest. Just mind my own business. There's some white, dirty-looking cyclist chick. She's speeding on the sidewalk, and then there was some homeless black man who just, I guess he didn't get out the way in time, and she was just like, "Move it, nigga, move it, you nigga." I don't want to be demonetized, so I'm just like, "Nigga, yeah, move it, you nigga." Yeah, that's what she said. It was a drive-by N-word. What was I gonna do? She was speeding on that bicycle. I couldn't chase after her. Like what could I do? But she said it so casually in front of a bunch of other white people. And there was a bunch of other white people that's kind of like, whoa, what got in her cookie? You know, jeez. You know that I don't think that could fly like that in Houston. And that if you were to do that in downtown Houston, maybe you could do that in Tomball, you know, Cypress or something. You could maybe get away with it in the Woodlands, but you're not gonna get away with that downtown Houston, you know. Another incident where, now this is an incident where, a guy, he was drunk and he came up to me and was, I don't know what it is about drunk white people. Not saying all y'all, but sometimes you let your lips a little too loose, and let those ends just start flying out, like it's some airline, like it's Spirit Airline. And he almost got a little too comfortable, and he saw the look on my face. Immediately apologized. Now, I'm not saying that couldn't happen in Houston and Dallas, but you as a white person in these cities, especially a place like Houston, you have to be a little bit more aware of your surroundings. And I think they're a little bit more aware of their surroundings to the point that it's like, I don't want a barrage of black hands, black fists coming at this soft white red skin. I don't want that to happen. Gonna just be nice about it. That's why I say Austin, with all the great press that it's gotten, rightfully so, the city's doing a lot of things that I wish, Houston and Dallas would do. I'm actually there's some things, like I said, it's like, man, I wish Houston would do that. I wish Houston would use their waterfront a little better than Austin. That's the nerd in me talking, But all in all, if you're a black person considering moving to Austin, please lower your expectations on some kind of black experience. That's not to say that there isn't any black people or black groups that are putting on for Austin. I know plenty of black groups, and I might put the description down below and go check them out. But just lower your expectations, and please don't move here from like Brooklyn or something like that. And like, well, I heard Austin was this, that, and third. You move to Austin, and then you think the whole state of Texas is like that. Houston and Dallas is completely different, especially Houston. All right, so I just had to get that off my chest.
Okay, so my experience in Austin as a black person, I enjoyed the city. I feel like if you come to tour or see the sights, it's very picturesque and scenic, even as far as music and art. I feel like they have a lot of things, not a lot of things for black people, but they have enough, and they're very open, I feel like, musically or whatever your artistry might be. But as far as traveling and living there, you see a bit of segregation between the certain parts of the city. If you're prone to like this type of thing, or you have a certain type of lifestyle, you kind of gravitate to this part of the city, whereas favorite over another part of the city. And you can tell some of the older parts or certain parts you would see more black people in, whereas you would go to another part and you will not see any black people at all. So that felt very weird as the
Alright, so I just had to get that off my chest. If you like or you dislike, please leave a comment below. I would greatly appreciate it. And until next time, holla at your brother.